Hi, I'm Richard West, Chief Executive of Red Flag Alert, and today we are at 20 Fenchurch Street, and I'm joined with Andy Warren, Chief Information Officer of Kennedys. Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Warren, Interim CIO at Kennedys. I've been here just over a year now. My background previously was 8 years in insurance broking. Prior to that was multiple years in investment banking. I'm here now at Kennedys to drive the transformational change, obviously looking at how data, automation and technology can really revolutionise the firm globally. We're looking at this from a really top-down level. This is senior endorsement all the way through to the people at the end of the technology.
How do you feel that the legal sector, when it comes to transformation and efficiencies, compares to the financial service market?
I think there's many opportunities. Firstly, we have to look at things of how we reduce the repetitive tasks, admin tasks, and ultimately drive data as well. I think two of the key things, certainly in this organisation, is number one is our colleagues, is our biggest asset, and I think number two is our data. One thing we've certainly seen across, or what I've seen at least, across the law industry is the quality of data captured is probably not where it should be. So we need to look at other providers to enrich that data to drive it forward. Yep. Not only from a client retention and growth perspective, but also from how we actually do our business. So the world that I've come from, of where it's been a lot of enriched data, we've looked at different things going forward and different tools and mediums to share data between clients and ourselves, and certainly in the broking industry, in the banking industry, is something that I think law really will benefit from, but also in a world where data is so key and we live our lives now with technology and with phones, we live data at our fingertips. Yeah. I think law has been behind that curve for a while. That doesn't mean it can't catch up, but it also means that we have a way forward. We know the path to get there. So I think in all, the transformation journey is not, just the people or the processes, certainly the technology, but the data has to be that core asset that goes through. And if you think simple things like taxonomies, we obviously work a lot for insurance companies. There are global insurance standards. We work a lot with litigation firms. So we have to look at things of how we get data sets together, AML, KYC, knowing your client, knowing our business, KYB as well. The onboarding of that previously has been very inefficient. Yep. I think we need to look at tools of how we onboard that. Obviously, we've been through things in the banking sector of 3 lines of defence, etc. So now we need to look at how we onboard clients faster. Who are our actual clients? Because again, we typically act on behalf of insurers. So ultimately, who is the person we're representing? Yep. We want to see the company data, and obviously we want to be set up and compliant before we start working on matters and defending our clients. The key part of that is the gathering that data. First of all, a lot of it today and previously has been obviously emails backwards and forwards and phone calls, and it might not be a one-time task. It might be 10, 12 tasks before we can actually start working on some of our high priority matters, such as cyber matters and things like that. So for us, it's certainly how we speed that process up, but also how we take the admin tasks away from fee earners so they can do what they need to be done by the clients. Now, this doesn't mean we need to move work around. It just means we need to think of how we make that process more efficient. What are our pain points today? And that's one thing as part of the transformation kind of journey within Kennedy since I've joined has been, if we look at the process flow from start to finish, from client onboarding all the way through to reporting at the very end, we need that data stream to be consistent from start to finish. And how we get that data in is almost the start of our very business, the data of not even who our clients are, but also who are we defending, what's the case, as to how do we get that, and then present that data back to our clients to show them that we have actively controlled it, but also seeing things and trending things and giving them active feedbacks. I think change is scary to many people, and the pace of change in technology has been lightning fast for consumers as well as for businesses. There is always going to be a fear of, can we act on behalf of this? A big thing obviously for us is conflict checking. Are we conflicted for the client or not? But again, that's driven by currently people manually chase through paper documents, send emails, phone calls, etc. If we can automate that with single sources of data that have got everything about the clients we know to man and who we're representing, then I think that over time will be adopted with the change management of things. Fear of change is a big thing in every industry. That's not just a law thing, but there's also a need to be compliant and sign it off, do checks and balances and make sure we're there. And I think that journey is more around the change management than it is around the technology, to be frank.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity for legal firms in general where if they sort of nail this digital transformation piece, it can be a real growth enabler for a law firm. More importantly, not just because of the customer onboarding, but actually in a market where there is slow adoption, the firms that do adopt and adopt quickly, they can really grow their businesses rapidly. Is that something that you're going to hopefully achieve within Kennedys?
100%. I think if we look at our business effectively, we have a volume business and we have a specialist business in complex. The volume business, any automation we can put in that process is, as with everything else, which we can then speed through that process faster, less human touch, less cost, and effectively then service our clients faster. So definitely leveraging that point. On the complex pieces as well, though, there's no change. We still need that data. We want to get instructed by our clients and start acting with immediate effect, especially in a world now of cyber attacks that you've seen some of the top retailers be hit by. We want to get onboarded, get going and get started straight away to protect our clients and get in front of things. So for us, that whole journey around digital transformation is key to starting that journey. Onboarding is not the only piece, it's the whole workflow from start to finish, but we can't start the other steps of the workflow until we've nailed the client onboarding piece, which is why we're really investing so heavily in this kind of automation and client onboarding process to get things done faster.
In a world where people demand stuff instantly, and in I suppose in a legal market where if you're trying to grow an organisation, a part of winning business is how quickly can you react. What do you see the challenges at a board level or internally with an SLT in terms of there are certain things that we now need to implement from a technology perspective to make this happen? And it's not a case of just doing it from a business perspective. Our customers, whether that's a business or a person, demand this level of onboarding now.
That's a great question. So for me, we're on a journey as Kennedys to achieve a $1 billion target of revenue by 2030. We have grown exponentially over the previous years, which has been driven solely by our customers and our clients, both corporate and individuals. Yes. Your question about how we're going to move towards that world, I think the reality comes down to the fact that the world we live now in is full of more risk than before. You can see that from the insurance world and the insurance market, that there's more things being insured every day than there previously was. So there is a more inherent risk appetite than there was before to insure things. Therefore, when they are exposed as clients, they want to be protected straight away. The onboarding aspect is the most painful aspect that we probably face in terms of getting information out of companies, etc. But the world we're going down now with KYB and larger databases of large client database centers like Dun & Bradstreet, for example, we've now got access to these data sets that we can just pull first and then go to our clients and say, look, can you just validate? Rather than input, it's now a review and validate. This is what we've got for you. Is this correct or not? That, I think, is going to take a lot of the heavy lifting away, because certainly, I think, from a procurement function in a large corporate, if you're onboarding 10, 20 firms a week, you're just filling the same data in over and over again. We want to really revolutionise that and say, look, this is what we've got from the wider world. Is this correct? And ultimately, from a sales perspective, we can then see the structure of the business as well and say, look, we're interacting with an aviation client, effectively, who's a global client, but only in the US. Well, we should be engaging with the UK entities, the APAC entities, etc. So the onboarding aspect of who we're dealing with today is certainly critical, but we also need to understand who are our wider clients. Whereas for a consumer client, it's obviously an individual and that's it. So the approach needs to be consistent, but have two different kind of threads to it effectively. And I think we want to certainly get to that consumer model of onboarding, and I think businesses do as well. Time is money. And ultimately, we are in the professional services firm business where we want to drive forward, and we want to drive forward efficiently as possible for our clients to maximise their returns. We do claims management for a lot of our clients as well. Again, that comes down to time to close the claim. We need to know who we're representing as soon as possible so we can shorten that life cycle down. And to us, that whole process of the business process from end to end, start to finish, technology can support it without a doubt to save the human interactions as best as possible, but you will still require human sign-off. And that for us is where we use services like yourselves to come and present us data to then sit there and go, is this the correct client? Is this the correct information about you? Please, sign or not, and we can create an audit trail behind it. So there's a big transformation going on around that piece, but we want to get more onto the onboarding in a shorter space of time. We want to grow our client accounts. We want to keep investing more with our clients. However, there are humans in this process, so we have to try and make it easier for them rather than just say, please just have another form to key in more data.
I agree. I think that we talk about KYB, but KYB, in my opinion, is broken in the fact that it's very manual. There are there's people in different business units using different data sets to try and get the same piece of intelligence. There's no single source of truth. I think the point you made there of actually how do you embrace a global data set to be able to say to your customers when they're coming to you, ABC Limited, is that you? Versus a web form, which is tell me who you are, what we're going to do. Because essentially with that data, you're going to have to then key it into a system. And then you've got the issues around data quality, data duplication, so on and so forth. So I think that's a really, really interesting point. I think that KYB piece for me as well, why is it lagging behind KYC? And KYC's been here, and KYB has been around clearly for many, many years, but technology in KYC is fastly adopted, whereas where I think in KYB, businesses slow to adopt that same technology that if they were a consumer. From a KYB perspective, what are you looking to achieve within an organization from shortening the sort of inquiry to actually we can now start billing work? You know, what's your challenge there, and what are you really looking to achieve?
So I think there's two aspects to this. One is ultimately understanding who our client is to start with, where are they based, etc. Setting up the bidding conditions, etc. SLAs, what do they expect from us? How do we move forward? What are we actually doing as the piece of work? Agreeing rates, etc. All of that into a central place where we can hold that as an absolute key, I think, because that's our gold dust. We can see everything around that. That will probably shorten certainly the onboarding process drastically by getting a central way through it, and then we can use technology to pull some of this data out of the documents and populate systems. So again, we're not just saying, look, we need to get all of our data into one place and then we're going to make someone else key into a system. No, we want to use tools like IDP and ingest into platforms, so there's no need for people to double key things. The second aspect, I think, is retrospective checks of KYB, right? Yep. We typically have relationships that are many, many years old. We should be, reacting to constant looking at when they're updating, because as we know, companies change, they get bought, they merge, they close down, etc. That constant check, is a world we now live in where things change so quickly that we need to make sure we've got constant data coming to us saying, this company has now been merged with XYZ, for example. Have we got a relationship with XYZ? Looking in our CRM systems, tying it through, working out what's happening. And also people move organisations as well. We touched on it earlier, where we've got key contacts, key clients that move firms, totally normal. We want to maintain that relationship of obviously where they are and with our existing clients as well. So for us, that data of our clients is so important. We have just set up a global client relationship program where we've got partners that own those relationships globally, because some of our clients are, massive multinationals. Yeah. It's not one person that interacts with one person, it's a big relationship, and that constant check and evolve, and insurance brokers have gone through a period of just merging and buying everyone together. We need to be aware of that data when it happens, not 12 months time at renewal time or 3 years time at renewal time when we sit there and go through the KYB checks again. We want constant data feeds. We want to be on the front foot and understand these things for a BD perspective, but also from a compliance perspective.
I think in a regulated market as well, that perpetual way of looking at KYB is massively important. So if we look at data just in the UK, our database makes about 600,000 changes a day. They are linked to persons of significant control changing, acquisitions, mergers, directors coming and going, businesses failing, so on and so forth. And I think that there's a lot of legal firms and even general businesses in regulated markets that they focus on that first part of the journey, which is we've onboarded someone, we know who they are, we're compliant. Yeah. And they forget about the fact that actually you have to remain compliant.
Correct.
And there's when it comes down to the cost, one of my former colleagues used to say, if you think the cost of being compliant is expensive, try being uncompliant, if that makes sense. And I think in a world where there is so much change happening, you've got interlocked companies, you've got webs of UBOs, you've got shell companies, so on and so forth. Lots of things changing at a daily basis. It's now more important than ever to adopt that perpetual side of KYB.
Absolutely.
In every single industry. What's your vision for that in Kennedys? How are you going to invest in the technology and the data sets to give the organisation that ability to be perpetual when it comes to that KYB side?
Yeah, no. So we've already invested an awful lot of money around central data sources, effectively, a single source of truth, if you will. Yep. The aspect of this as well is obviously from compliance is one angle, and you have to think, GDPR, right to be forgotten, etc. We need to know where our data is in what system so we can delete it correctly. But also from our point of view, it's the analytics around that as well. And I think that's certainly something that law is behind on. Analytics is a difficult thing to master. However, we're in a world now of AI. We need to have these data sets clean, because it's the usual crap in, crap out. We need to make sure that we've got the right data set and enriching it from, data sources like your own, where it is up to date and live data. So for us, we're investing more and more in AI. We've done some partnerships with some new firms recently. It's very much on the route we're taking, but the investment doesn't stop once we've done a little piece of work and we've gone, right, we've got an AI tool, we've got a single database, we're all done. This is a continuous journey of improvement, and technology moves constantly, so we have to build an architecture, which we've literally just finished this year, which is a plug-and-play architecture. We know technology changes. We know things will change. There are some stable points within the legal industry in terms of apps that will never change, and we're fine with that. But the data still needs to be clean in those apps where they are, and a lot of it's historical. So we need to work at that cleaning, that scrubbing, that working, and the world we need to get towards is investment in our people as well, which is data stewards. Who owns that data ultimately within Kennedys? And I think that's the thing that people think tech's going to fix all these issues, it's going to enrich things. It's certainly going to help, but we still need accountability of when someone goes to meet the client, they have a view of the client relationship with Kennedys, what they do today, how many matters, what's the billing ratios, what's our WIP, what's due, etc. That information needs to be at their fingertips wherever they are in the world. So we're partnering with some big software providers to drive that view of real-time data. We are of the view that real-time data is sub 3 minutes. If one of our partners is going to meet a global client relation, they should know everything that we do as a firm globally with that. So we've really invested in that already. We're going to start seeing the benefits of that now. We've got the global client program, as I mentioned before. We can start arming our partners, our sales teams, with the right information. But also we can put stuff in there which is workflow tasks in terms of compliance checks, for example, or even, what would you like to see? Do they want access to our own data sets to do their own analytics? Absolutely. The world in law is very much around reporting, being, Excel sheets or PDFs. The world I came from 15 years ago was very much, no, I want my own data set to enrich with my own external feeds to then drive my own analytics. That's where we've got to get to, because we're in a world where, the insurers are working at an alarming pace and re-rating things constantly. They want to know what is the litigation cost of claims. We now have that data in a accessible area, which they can come and harvest in the right possible way with the right controls. So we've built the architecture effectively. We're now enriching the data in the architecture. Now it's a case of, can we really accelerate on that path? And I think that's the exciting bit that Kennedys brings now, is it is investing in those points of view and driving forward on that KYB, KYC. We know who our clients are. We know the structures. If you look at some of these large insurers, they've got tens of thousands of entities. We can now map them all together, and we haven't just got ABC client 50,000 times. We've got ABC with a hierarchy of a parent and child relationship. So for us, it's a real step forward, and continues to be a step forward that we're going to take over the next 18, 24 months.
So you talked a lot there about single source of truth. I think we can also agree in most firms there isn't a single source of truth. There is silos of data. There's the data that each department needs versus the overall intelligence that an organisation needs to understand how it operates. Where do you see orchestration and automation being used in, I suppose, that customer onboarding journey?
So I think from the very start all the way through. So for me, I think if a new client comes on board, we should be effectively sending them a form that's an onboarding form where we've pre-populated with third-party data and said, this is what we've got, can you confirm, create an audit trail. It then comes into the firm, to the partner, to whoever's working on the matters. It will then orchestrate through kind of a BPM tool of, we've got this new matter, here's what we've got, the escalation all the way through. And then ultimately working out the resource allocations against that piece of work. And then, one of the biggest things for us, obviously, as well, is, and as the industry as a whole, is then getting the money in the door straight away, all right? Sending the bills out on time, automating that process. But again, presenting that data to our colleagues, rather than making them scrabble around different data sources of data and different systems, giving them the end of month view, there's what you've built this month with all your team, please tick and cross and review, and then send out the door and automate that process, and then also automate the collection of that money as best as possible. So the whole journey on client is the first bit, but the work needs to be done, and then obviously needs to be billed, but also the reporting back to the client need partners at the end of the month to say we billed X, but we've only received Y. Yeah. Can you have the conversation, and then putting the workflow in place to say, look, have you reached out? Has it been done? What's the feedback? That whole end-to-end piece I think is key, but it can only be done when you've got that source of truth of your data, and that's what we've worked so hard on, mapping things together and putting it into a single source to see it from all our systems. It doesn't mean it's a single source of truth. It's a single place to go to, absolutely, which we can query, right? And the analytical engines will now drive that through and say we can see all of ABC Limited business, and we can start to build it out. And to my earlier point of the data stewards, we can start going to these partners saying, this is what we've got. This is gold to give to you to go and talk to the client relationships, and then map it yourselves how it works.
How are you seeing that happen already in the organisation, where you've been able to free up cost and go back to the business and go, right, where can we now reinvest this to actually hit our growth goals versus fueling the onboarding side?
So we've recently just started off a big piece of work, investment work, effectively to align the business to how we're going to support the growth journey we're going with. And across that, we're touching everything from knowledge to finance to IT to BD to risk and compliance to make sure that everything's aligned together. We will see some work moving from different teams, and there are teams today that do work they probably shouldn't do purely because there was no one else to do it. Yeah. We want to automate those repetitive tasks as best we can and redeploy them in areas where they're needed, and we're seeing certain pain points across the business and also across business services. Now, we don't need to go and start hiring more people. Yeah. We need to just solve that problem with the people that we've got available today and stop them doing the repetitive task over and over again. Typically, I think law firms grow. When they grow by revenue, their cost base grows with it in a linear fashion. Absolutely. We want to try and stop that effectively and still grow. Obviously, costs are going to go up, simple IT costs of laptops and licenses, etc. But we shouldn't be going at the same rate of growth of revenue. And as a firm where we're predicted to effectively double our revenues, we don't want to double our cost base. We want to use the resources we've got today and the most efficient tasks possible. We do not want to replace them with AI. AI is there to help, and AI is there to drive efficiencies. But what we want to do is use our staff and our colleagues in more efficient ways that's better value for money for the firm, to allow our fee earners to spend more time doing what they need to do, which is typically less admin and more defence drafting. Just visualising it, just presenting the problem of WIP to the people and saying, look, we're doing this work before we take on some more work with the same client. Do we want to address this first? And putting some general workflow in the systems around them. And I think technology is there to support the process. If the technology is not there to support the process, it's more painful for the people that are performing the process. And I think that's the opportunity here, is to put simple technology flows in place and say, this is the challenge, this is how we're tracking it. We can then look at it from a global perspective and see, is there any areas we need to then, to the earlier point, focus our finance colleagues on and our billing team? Have we got slow payers, for example? What do we want to do about that relationship? Have we got ones that don't pay us at all, for example? All this data, I think we are responsible in technology to present it back. And to your point around data, across technology, we actually have a pillar now just of data, effectively, which is designed around the strategy and the pipeline building and the presentation of that data, which is alongside, security, infrastructure, apps and ops. It's that important, I believe, now that, to my earlier point, colleagues are our number one asset, data's our number two. Yeah. As technologists, we should be presenting it, and we should be, signposting where we see problems, but also opportunities, and presenting it, putting it into the hands of our fee earners, and saying, look, when you go and meet that client, here's the business we're doing, but by the way, they still owe us for the following, and we haven't heard anything, and it's X amount of days overdue. So I think that's the piece we need to get to, but very cognizant that this industry is a people-based industry, and relationships are very sensitive sometimes. So it's striking that balance, but again, having the data is a lot easier to have that conversation rather than, I've just been told by finance, you're late on a bill. What's the bill for? I don't know. So for us, I think that's on us to present that data and then put some process and some metrics and some KPIs around it.
Do you see much analysis when looking at WIP through a financial risk lens? So if you're managing a WIP of £10 million, which is across X amount of customers, when looking at that in terms of a relationship perspective internally, clearly it's an easy way to segment that data. But when actually looking at it from where's the risk in this WIP, if that makes sense as well, are you seeing that information being used at sort of board and partner level where you're able to, with technology and data, be able to articulate, of this risk in our WIP, this is what we should really be prioritising.
So that's on our roadmap now.
Right.
Obviously, with the data that we get from Red Flag,
Yeah.
we are going to drive that in and say this is what we're seeing for performance and companies and payment things,
Mm-hmm.
etc. That's certainly to be added into that risk piece. We manage it very closely. Obviously, cash flows, you can imagine, is a big challenge for every law firm, which is money coming in, money going out. So it's already actively monitored, but there's obviously, as I said earlier, more we can do to enrich that data feed to say, here's your £10 million WIP. We believe there's a risk of X at the bottom here. What do we want to do about it? Do we want to mitigate the risk? What steps, what actions, what process do we want to put in place? So I think, although we actively manage it today, we could do it with more data, more insight into these things. And I think, again, modelling as well with analytics to work out, historically, do we see certain clients or certain regions being slower because it's Christmas, for example, or Easter? These are the pieces we need to work through. And, having the conversations, I think, with our clients also strengthens that relationship with our clients. So being, transparent about, we're doing the work, we're putting the bills in, but we're not getting paid on time. Here's the history of the last 4 years of payments. We could have that honest conversation, but we can only have it when we've got the data. So I think technology's got a bigger part to play than it previously has, and that's certainly on our roadmap now to drive that through as part of kind of our client onboarding piece as well. And for us, there is so much data out there. We can use all of these things to make better financial decisions as a firm.
Do you think then, let's look at that same scenario. So you've analysed WIP, you've sat there and gone, here's 15% that we really think is critical that we need to bring in the next 30 days. As a technologist, you're now looking at that going, that's something also that we can look to orchestrate and automate.
100%. And I think simple automation of, if it's high risk, we're not going to get paid, what processes are we going to put in place? Because we need to know as soon as possible that if it's not going to get paid, for example. So there's steps we can put in place with metrics, analytics, data feeds that come in and say, well, historically, in the last 3 years, they've been a slow payer by 60 days plus. It's currently at 45 days. Let's check on day 60. We can automate these things and again, remove that manual effort that we've got today that, I think everyone's got in the industry of chasing people by picking a phone up or sending an email or waiting until they see them next. We should be automating as best as possible to get visibility for big business decisions. We are investing an awful lot of money in technology, business services, risk and compliance, and all the services we're doing now. Cash flow is king at the end of the day, and obviously for our partners is also king. So we want as much checks and balances around that as possible, and to continue to improve that to solve the problem that most law firms see, which is we're due X, but we've not been paid X. So how do we get paid X faster?
Prior to Red Flag Alert, you would have put a business case together to the organisation around, if we're going to make this investment, we can save this money, we can reinvest in other areas of businesses. What were sort of the three main areas where you're seeing heavy costs to sort of client onboarding and the impact that was having on your overall cost of acquisition?
So I think I would say high level was people, process and technology.
Always comes down to those three.
It does, doesn't it? So firstly, the people cost. Onboarding more clients requires more people in the UK to effectively go through the checks and run the balances and get things done. The process itself was backwards and forwards, constantly, trying to get more data. It might be one email, it might be 50 emails, it might be 50 emails and 3 calls. It was constant. And then ultimately, there's different technology solutions being used on how they find the data from different data sources or different historical apps and legacy apps. So what we saw was by bringing one solution in, obviously for the red flag pieces, to drive that client data enrichment as automated as possible. It's also 24/7. We're not waiting 9 till 5. We've got clients all around the world, but effectively reliant on some business services teams just in the UK base. Yeah. So for us, we wanted to produce something that was enterprise ready, enterprise grade as well, to move those people that are doing repetitive tasks where you're going to see a lot of people leave because you're doing the same thing over and over again, to go into other parts of the business where they can be much more valuable to us as a firm.
Yeah. I suppose fast forward to today, have you now seen those changes now you've implemented that type of solution?
So we've certainly seen changes come through in terms of the time to onboard clients being significantly faster. I think also the data that we get in as well is much cleaner, much faster, because some clients put data in that they've just typed quickly. We're now seeing a piece. There's a value to be added now to go back to the client saying, this is what we've got on you, is this correct or not? That's coming into the new platforms that are arriving next year as well, so we're going to see that firm-wide as we go forward. But from the schemes that we're using on at the moment, it's 100% created a benefit because we're not having to hire people to do the onboarding, we've actually automated it, and then we can just bring them on for the litigation work at the back of it.
So this work that you're doing with us at the moment, is this something that you're looking to roll out across the entire organisation?
100%.
Yeah.
Globally. It's the way forward, I think. Obviously, the size of the database you've got for our clients, our client base of where we are, but also, we're looking at it from a perspective as well, in terms of, we do work with certain clients in the UK today. Well, they're global clients, so we should be building those relationships and putting that hierarchy through as well, where you are, gives us this data, not just for us today to look at this from a UK or a global perspective. We want to drive to the world where we have a global list of clients, we have a local list of clients, and we can see those changes and that enrichment going forward.
What challenges do you have from a technology perspective? Obviously, you're a multinational firm. You're dealing and onboarding customers and individuals from all around the world. How are you centrally collecting data from all around the world and putting it into a single version here? I'll give an example. For instance, if you're onboarding somebody from China, the way that they input data in a web form versus the way that we would input that same data on the same individual here in the UK, completely different, although the data is exactly the same. What challenges are you facing or are you thinking about when creating a global solution, in terms of how are we're gonna collect this data, but ultimately we need to get it back into that single source of truth here in the UK, and I suppose how is technology going to enable that for you?
Yeah, so we started a foundational IT program to move to cloud at the beginning of the year. We've moved a significant chunk to cloud already for the key kind of internal apps. We're now going to start the journey of moving some of our other client data into these different regions effectively. So we obviously we're communicating with our clients at the moment in terms of, we're going to be migrating your data. Obviously it's held where it is today. This is active clients and inactive clients, because obviously the right to be forgotten. That will solve a lot of problems, because we are on a tech stack that hasn't been invested in for a very long time. Yep. We have now invested in it. We're now moving cloud. We're looking at better performance. We're making sure that, if you work on multi-jurisdictional matters, so if I'm working in China and then I move to work on a matter in the UK, for example, how we keep that data flow consistent. We don't want to have to log into two systems. Again, we need the party lines to separate the data effectively, but there's a world we live in now where, we need to be hybrid in the way we work. COVID brought that in. So we've designed an architecture which supports that, but also controls the data. To us, the only people we want to have access to the data is ourselves. We will provide it to the clients themselves in the right manner, the right controls. So the architecture had to cater for both of those. That wasn't a quick architecture to come up with. However, based on experiences of previous organisations, we had one that we knew worked. So we've built on that. But at the same time, we're in a world now, and I think it's ever changing with data. If you look at GDPR and clients' data and PII data, is some clients want their data held and resided specifically in certain countries. So we've designed the architecture to function in that prospect. And again, that's a business-based decision, because there's cost associated to it. However, the clients that have asked for it do typically get that, and they're on the roadmap to have things done. But we're on a vision that by next year we will be a fully cloud-centric application, a state of where we are, integrating with SaaS providers as well, to be resilient globally. So multi-region, multi-zone setups from a cloud perspective, because our clients' data might be in the country they're in, but they might want specialties from another part of the business in Kennedys in the US, for example. And it's how we maintain control and manage that data is key and foundational to what we're doing. And that, again, enriching that core set of data, the data steward point, who can have access to it, putting the controls in place, then on the whole reporting point of view, who can actually see that data as well. So it's been quite a complicated three-tier architecture, but with the help of bringing the data together, that's enabled us to have those conversations and say, look, we can now see where we are and what we've got to do.
So there's a cost in transformation, and how important is it for you selecting the right partner when approaching these projects?
100%. I think for us, I've got a very clear vision, which is I don't want to work with providers. I want to work with partners, because in all transformation programs we've probably all been involved in, they've never gone to plan. There's been issues, there's been challenges, and it's how you work with that partner, I think, is the key thing. And having that
scope creep.
Scope creep
Happens all the time.
Exactly. External factors come in, suddenly something's changed. All these things happen, change of management teams. There's a million of different things that could happen. And from our perspective, it's how do we work with someone that we can just get on a call, pick up the phone and go, look, we've got these issues, this has arisen, what's the plan? And to have a frank, honest conversation without being the first thing of going, let's pull the contract out and see what's in the contract. to me, it enables that transformation journey to continue. It doesn't stop it. If anything, it puts more comfort blanket around it and saying, look, the guys internally are having those conversations. We haven't talked dollars. We haven't talked things yet. We're having this conversation. Can we solution it as a team, as one team? You know, everyone's got the same badge on. And to me, that's critical. And I think that's why we're quite selective with our partners. We don't tend to refer to people like yourselves as vendors. We literally do see you as partners in helping us on our journey to enable our success and our business drivers that we want. We are driving a mantra effectively across technology where we see it as a platform view, not an application view. So to us, I don't want anyone knowing what application we're using. I want them to know I've got a billing platform, or I've got a case management platform, or I've got an onboarding platform. If it's made up of 5 or 6 applications, it should be irrelevant and it should be a seamless journey through the stack for the end users. Now, having a single API to go to, is less points of failure, to be frank, but secondly, it holds true to that mantra of we want a simple architecture, and we want an architecture that plugs in together, because we might change things, we might not change things, but we want to have the option to do it and not sit here and be, we've got a legacy integration that we've then got to unwind. And tech debt is one of the biggest things across all the industries, I think, not just professional services, but certainly banking systems and insurance worlds.
In my business, like you said,
exactly.
Tech debt is it's the first line of most tech papers at board level. It's like, what are we doing, which is just debt. We don't need to be doing them.
Exactly. So we're trying to architect for something that avoids that problem. Now, some of these things are not avoidable, but to the best of our abilities, we could steer away from them and say we're just going down this path with integrated single APIs. Because again, if I have 10 different APIs for 10 different services, you can guarantee every 12 months I'll be having conversations of, well, we've changed, we can do this, we can do that. I haven't got the time to have these different conversations, nor do I want to have all the different integration points, the testing. And again, we're on this transformational journey of new technologies coming into the firm. Mm-hmm. We want to make the testing as simple as possible. We are, a 24/7 firm. We have, offices all around the world. Mm-hmm. Downtime on production systems for us is the most costly time we have things, because people aren't billing. Mm-hmm. So for us, downtime is a big no-brainer. For us, we want, a blue-green deploy environment where we have a parallel production environment. We cut across at a flick of a switch, we're done. But having one API feed into that system is a very simple test, tick and flick, and we can cut across, and therefore the business impact is less. And that's very much the mantra we're driving globally on what we're doing.
So, Andy, what was happening in your world before going out to market and looking for a provider like Red Flag Alert?
So we were looking at kind of the process of onboarding as a thing across all the different technology pieces that we had in place at the time. Yeah. Numerous different systems and numerous different processes and ways of capturing data. And for us, it seemed a very simple win for us to say, well, why are we doing this all manually? There's services out there that we know from the banking world and from the insurance world of how we onboard clients. This, to us, looks like a very simple win of build something that effectively can just then harbour the API data straight in, and we can just work on this onboarding basis. Now, there was a particular, obviously, project that we started that's got a huge volume of claims against it. So we said, well, this will be a perfect test case to bring this in and effectively enrich all the data that's coming in and do all the work for us, effectively take our heavy lifting away from us. So for us, we looked at, we need to automate this step in the process, and it's the start of the process. So you'd almost say, let's start here. It makes perfect sense. And that's when we started going, well, what providers are out there that we can go and use that can service our needs specifically for, the customer being a consumer or being a company. So
what was one of the main factors for you selecting Red Flag Alert as a part of being this test case that has so much more potential within your organisation? What was the sort of one thing that made you go, this is a partnership that I think we can invest in?
I think the technology was a big driver from us. Obviously, our technology teams met early on, and this is the requirement set. And I think also, to work correctly with partners, you need to come to the table with your set of requirements that are very clear and work through why and what the SLAs, what do we need from people, what's the timing we're expecting, what's our gold standard, and then have that frank conversation. What my team came away with very quickly was they can do all of it out the box day one. Now, then we said, well, can we customize it for other workflows? Because this test case we've given you, this user case, isn't the whole world. And that's when your technology started to shine through to us and say, actually, we can customize the workflows for you. The APIs can be changed specifically for this. But it's all within one wrapper and one container. It's not, we've got 50 different APIs. We've still got one. We've just changed the workflows on it. And so my team came away going, we can make this work with all of our platforms now as a single feat. And for us, the technology was a big tick for technologists anyway. But also, I think just looking at your background, who you work with, who your current client sets are as well, you've established yourself as a real market leader. And from our point of view, you give us a lot more data than probably other competitors would give in the same marketplace when we did kind of the tick and flick of yourself against other firms. And the technology gave us comfort, and we've seen firsthand that that was the right comfort to have as well.
So obviously, as CIO, one of the challenges that you always have is delivering on your technical roadmap. How important was it when selecting the right vendor to get deployment done quickly as well and operational?
So I'd say firstly partner, not vendor. But
Partner,
secondly, I think you're always dubious when plans get put out in front of you and timelines because, like I said, there's so many external factors that can change. However, the open communication and even having your project managers on my back to get stuff done as well, and that's a real thing of not being scared to go to the clients and saying you're missing out, you're not doing this, we need this done, we need this escalated. That total relationship to me was a very flat relationship. There was no hierarchy, there was no one scared that you couldn't talk to anyone, which was great. And we hit the dates that we said we were going to hit. Well, you guys hit the dates you said you were going to hit, and then my guys kind of dovetailed into it. And I think that very much is a real sign of trust in terms of you put us front and centre, you committed to us and you honoured it. It wasn't easy, as we all know, but we addressed those problems very quickly as a team, as a collective, and that for us gave us confidence to say, right, this is the solution now globally, what we want to drive.
Why do you think there is such a long timeline for customer onboarding? And I suppose the second point is how embracing technology like Red Flag Alert, depending on the cadence, depending on the workflow, you can actually optimize and reduce the onboarding. You're not going to have instant onboarding. I get that. Mm-hmm. You probably can do in some cases, but where are you looking to use technology, or where technology, irrespective of Red Flag Alert, can help shrink that onboarding journey?
We've gone around the firm and we've kind of looked at the pain points across the entire process, end to end, from the very start of the value chain to the very end of the value chain. We have to constantly look at what the pain points are, and it's a continuous improvement thing, because by solving one pain point, you can ultimately create another pain point further down the chain. So you're kind of always chasing your tail a little bit, but we can certainly see it being reduced by, like I said, the population of data to the clients up front. This is what we've got for you, this is the right entity, etc., etc. That's going to help, but again, it's a constant, it's continuous improvement, right? The world's going to change. There'll be a new check or balance will come in from a regulatory perspective that we'll need to bring in. This is not a one and done piece of where we are in technology world. We're looking at this as this is the first step of probably many steps. Yeah. And as your services continue to give us new releases and new services and new features, we want to keep embracing those as we go forward. Now, that whole onboarding step could be concatenated down even smaller, I agree, but you get to our earlier point of, there's nervousness, right? Automating things seamlessly where no humans involved in the process makes people nervous, especially in our industry. That's unrealistic, that goal. However, arming them with as much data as possible, as enriched as possible, and having it validated by someone on the client side and having an audit trail logged, I think is absolutely key. That's not to mean we're not going to get to full automation, but there's going to be full automation with a sign-off from a human at some point.
One of the biggest challenges that we find working with thousands of businesses across multiple sectors is ultimate beneficial ownership. Now, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of I suppose there's 2 points here. In a world where there are more and more vendors, not partners at this point, vendors who are trying to win your business in the data market in general, I think there's a lot of people out there saying that they do certain things that in essence and reality they actually don't. One of those at the moment is, for me, ultimate beneficial ownership. There's a lot of companies out there saying we do ultimate beneficial ownership, but actually in fact they don't. They look at company's house information and they can say person of significant control is X, but what if X is a company, or what if that business is then offshore? These sort of trails die. But in an organisation like yours, where you're dealing with global businesses, how important is it for you to partner with the right partner who can give you the confidence that you know exactly who you're working with, whether that's domestic or internationally, and that you can be confident that with the level of insights that Red Flag Alert's invested into ultimate beneficial owner insights, gives you that confidence and to your wider team?
No, agree. Comfort is probably the biggest piece, right? Is leaning on a supplier like yourself, or even a partner as yourself, is to give us the confidence and the comfort factor that you've got the data sets to give us. That doesn't mean it's got all the answers involved in it, but what it does mean is it's giving us a source of data which is reliable, that we can lean on, that we can actually sit there and go, look, we haven't just relied on a human keying in some information from an email to tell us that they're the UBO. We've actually pulled it from a third-party data source. It's a reliable data source. Here it is. we've got the checks, we've got the balances, we've got the trails through. I mean, even your UI looks really good. That shows us that whole flow through. We've got an artifact effectively to lean on from a risk and compliance perspective to say, this is the output, this is the evidence where we've got to. Now, it's a great subject because UBOs can change all the time, right? And they constantly change. And that's one thing I think, certainly your guys, in you as a company, is a differentiator, is it's the constant reviewing. It's not one and done. We just get the alerts, this has changed, this has changed, this has changed, which keeps us even more compliant because it keeps us on our toes as well, saying that we've built a process not only to onboard, but also to review and to contain it going forward. And there might be multiple changes in this UBO world, but we're factoring that into the technology that obviously you provide us and how we manage that further down the stream.